As I previously indicated, the final step, step 10 in the instructional design process, is actually not the final step. It's a step that needs to be done throughout the entire process. And as I indicated earlier, it probably fits best initially once you enter into the design phase of the entire process. And so even though it's at the top of the list there, or the top of the graphic, it definitely speaks to something that is part of the entire process. But I wanted to focus specifically on some of the design phase evaluation procedures that are very, very common in the field of instruction. And there's actually three really common ways that you would plan out an evaluation. One is what's called a one-to-one evaluation, and that is simply once you get your materials together, once you've designed the basic material following all your analyses, it's good to have a member of the target population sit down and go through the materials and have them provide you with some feedback over how interesting they are, how clear the directions are, how much time it takes them to accomplish certain things, whether or not they notice any things like typos, or whether they have any general suggestions for anything. Doing a one-to-one evaluation can be very crucial for that. There's also expert reviews that you might want to plan out within the design and development process. A content reviewer might be the person who knows more about the content than you, and you want to ensure, if you're developing your own materials and not just using a textbook chapter or whatever to deliver content, that what you're doing is accurate. And so that content expert might be somebody who teaches in the room right next to you, or it might be online. You might have to compare the content to things that are presented from other sources. And then there's, of course, a teaching expert reviewer, and that's a person who maybe has more experience teaching than you and can provide you with some feedback over how things look in general, and what are some of the concerns, particularly implementation concerns, associated with the development of your material. I'll tell you, I am married to a very patient woman who has had to conduct reviews of material that I've developed over the years regularly. And it's okay sometimes that she is a complete novice regarding any of the content. It's just good to have somebody else edit your stuff, you know. And if it can be a member of the target population for a one-to-one evaluation, that would be ideal. But it doesn't always have to be, and it can't always be that way, depending on timing issues and other things. So there are specific directions for conducting these kinds of formative evaluation procedures in the back of the notes. So review those, and you're going to be asked in this project just to identify what you're going to do, what you would plan to do in the development of your material at a minimum. And it would be very good if you would conduct a one-to-one evaluation for the project once you've developed your material. And since you're working in design teams, then you all can actually serve as experts, content experts, or teaching experts, or whatnot. So maybe just among yourselves you can conduct these kinds of formative evaluations. So that's it. That's the whole process. I'm glad we're leaving this journey on the formative evaluation note, because it's open-ended and it needs to be part of the general practice of educators. It certainly is the general practice of professionals who develop material for training in the first place, and it should become part of the culture of classroom teachers as well. Granted, they don't always have time for this, but it should just become part of the culture. Teachers should constantly be sharing new materials that they are in the process of developing with other teachers to get some really quick and dirty feedback over that. So that's just an important cultural thing that, again, I think speaks to one of the main differences between the instructional design process, which is very comprehensive and is always focused on some important decision making, like what's important to be learned, and in what context can this be learned, and what data could I collect to continually improve it. That's a different mindset than a teacher who might sit down with a weekly or 9-week lesson plan and just starts to identify parts of a text that they might use on this day or that day or whatnot. It's a whole different way of looking at that at the process, and I think it's something that if teachers can embrace and incorporate more into their general mind frame and into the general way that they conduct themselves as professionals, then I think the entire profession would benefit.